Welcome to the weekly swing low. It's July 13th, 2025. We'll go over our normal tickers today. Big picture, we are getting late. We're late in the daily cycle, right? Like, no two ways about it, right? It's day 32 on Friday was. Unless this was a tiny little daily cycle low, possible. I don't know. That seems kind of unlikely, though. And we're also on week 13. So let's start with SPY, ticker single, SPY. So as I said, Friday was day 32, but you can also notice, look at these candles for the last six trading days, all really just inside a range, which tells you what you'll see on the weekly chart. Right, so on the weekly chart, what you would expect is a doji, which is what we have. So we're just kind of in wait and see mode here, a little consolidation, but it's happening on day 32 of a daily cycle. So I would expect a daily cycle decline is going to begin soon. Maybe the CPI print is a catalyst. So we have a doji candle on the weekly for SPY, high of $626.87 and a low at $617.87. Oh, wow. The low is, it's almost at exactly $9 range. Interesting. So what's about what side of that range do we break out of, right? And on the daily chart, your low for Friday was $621.53. And so if you got a close below that, that would form a swing high, which would actually be a double top ish, right? Because we made a new all time high on Thursday, but just a marginal one. And so that is where SPY lands. In terms of the 15-minute chart, it began to roll over towards the end of the day. You can see these are 15-minute candles. And so very simple. It's got to trade above the high of this candle here, so above $624.47, right, to keep the upside going. But at this point, you're really looking for the next daily swing low to signal a daily cycle decline. But that doesn't have to be the end of the world. It is week 13, so it's possible that this daily cycle decline is also a weekly cycle decline. You could see a world where, right, like price comes back to there, right, like comes back and tests that area, right, and then probably a successful test, and then back to more price discovery. That would be my sort of base case. So that's SPY. It's a similar uh, situation for all the other indices. The levels will just be different. So we'll go through those one by one. So QQQ, same kind of doji candle on the weekly. Range is $557.63 and a low of $549.58. And the low on Friday was $552.05. So close below that gives us a swing high that is really a double top. And of course, now at this point, we'll see where the Monday candle lands, but the goalpost kind of just keeps moving to the low of that next candle to form that daily swing high. And on the 15-minute chart, we need to see a move above $554.86 for a continued upside. That would leave behind a little swing low on those lower time frames. Again, same count, day 32, day 32 and also week 13. You could see a world where we get a pullback to around, let's say, 540 to kind of reset things. That would be the previous all-time high. So but again, long-term bottom in place most likely. Look at this wick, man. Look at this thing. That was your April candle. Little nice, beautiful hammer, long lower wick. That's QQQ. DIA is actually already a swing high. That's important. So two things. One is that DIA did not make a new all-time high on Thursday the way SPY did, and QQQ. And it also, well, let's see. A daily swing high would be active below $445.57, and we closed at, oh yeah, so we closed right below that. So like I'll just bring this line down there, right? Okay, so as long as we stay below that level, we actually have a daily swing high in place for the Dow. That could be kind of leading the rest of the market. So maybe this is the first one to have its daily cycle decline. That's important. And on the weekly, it also had a red candle for the weekly. A trade below $438.66, like a close below that next week, would be a weekly swing high. So we want to watch for that. What about IWM? So IWM actually also a swing high, right? So as of Friday, so Friday we closed below $222.86. That forms a daily swing high. That is important. These things could be leading the broader market, but still, I suspect we have a long-term bottom in place. And so something like IWM is a nice little catch-up trade, right? You imagine, we're looking at the monthly chart here. We get a little pullback here, a little wick, right? This thing would go red below $214 and 62 cents. Then maybe a recovery, and then retest those all-time highs. That's IWM. What about SMH? So SMH made a higher high on the weekly, so we don't have a doji, but we're still in exhaustion mode. Could see a world where this thing pulls back. In this case, for this thing, it would be around 270 in that area. That's the previous all-time high. The daily, we would need, at this point, we need a close below $284.56 for a daily swing high and potential. Actually, no, Friday was a new all-time high. So just a close below $285.55 would be a daily swing high, and would potentially cause the weekly signal the weekly cycle decline. On the really short time frames, need to get above $288 on the 15-minute chart to leave a little swing low behind and continue the upside. But again, we're late in the daily cycle, so I would expect we get a daily cycle decline soon. What about Dixie? So Dixie trying to do a little bounce here. Week 11 of a weekly cycle, and it is making a little swing low, right, on the weekly. So by closing above 97.42, the problem is it's only week 11, so that would be a really early weekly cycle low. On a daily chart, we've been rallying for about 8 days, so that's important because if this is a bearish daily cycle, an 8-day rally is getting to the upper band of how long we would expect, a rally to last. So you'd expect this thing to roll over pretty soon. So we should have an answer about, is this like a legit weekly low, or is this just a bounce? I suspect it's the latter, that it's a bounce, that this was a weekly cycle that topped out on week 3, and maybe we continue to week 20 or something like that. Not a prediction, just something that we should watch for. And what we're seeing from the U.S. 10-year is a bounce, right? It's week 14, as we've been talking about for weeks now, many weeks, right? We're just still inside this range, right? The upper range, mind you, of this big green candle from the week of April 7th when the broader markets bottomed as well. This is week 14. Our top was week 7. You could easily see a world where we go back up and test that and then bounce back here. In fact, that's kind of what I expect. So no fireworks, just kind of trading in a range the way you would expect yields to, but at the higher end of it. That's important. What about U.S. oil? So U.S. oil is actually holding up here. It made a little higher high on the weekly chart by closing above $67.55. That becomes an important pivot point. This was looking like a bear flag on the daily. Look at this consolidation, but now we're lifting off from there. So very clear line in the sand. It's got to stay above $66.48 on the daily chart. If we close below that, this little cluster becomes a swing high and your potential little lower high off of this bear flag. So that's what you're watching for here. But on the weekly chart, you have the potential that this is week 13, right? Yeah. At this point, there's not a ton of signal here. But what you do have is 2 green weeks in a row, and you made a higher high, so you want to, not something I would be short for sure. What about TLT? So TLT, question if we have a early weekly cycle low here back on the week of May 19th. What we do have is a swing high now on the weekly chart. So by closing below $86.85, we have formed a weekly swing high. That's important, right? And so there's a world where, this was your top on week 11. We made this low here on week 18. Now we're making this bounce, right? Like if we play this out, this would be 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. This would be week 25. So you could see a world where we're going to get like a 30-week, low on week 30, and we continue lower. Maybe it's just a double bottom of this, which would basically kind of be a triple bottom. But your near-term signal is down, very clear line in the sand, $86.85 on the daily chart. And we had talked about this on the previous last update. Just like the broader market, we were getting late in the daily cycle. In this case, we got that swing high, right? Like this is your high here back on, the 1st of July actually. The low for that candle was $87.66. We did close below that. And importantly, we've now made a lower high below that. That's very, very important, right? Like this is your swing high, this candle here, right? So you get your swing high and then you get a leg down. And then what do you get? You get a leg up. But what is this? It's called a lower high, my friends. Now, the thing is, we've got to break below here next, right? We've got to break below this. So below $85.44, that becomes a very clear line in the sand. Of course, watch for false breakdowns, right? You see a world where we get a wick below that and then resume back up. But more likely, this is your daily cycle high. So this is leading, like this topped before the broader markets. That would put this, what would be the count here? So that would be day 26, and this would be day 33. So you'd be a week and a half into the daily cycle, the daily cycle decline. But more importantly, potentially just resuming the weekly cycle decline off of this downdraft here. So that's TLT, and TBT, of course, is doing the opposite. So TBT needs to stay clearly needs to stay above $36.55 would be your pivot point. Let's move to Bitcoin and we'll do gold after that. Big chart to really pay attention to is the weekly right now. We are on week 13. So week 13. So still got some room. Could still absolutely could run. This week ran for 19 weeks, right? This one ran, and not, there was some super choppiness there. That was 21 weeks, right? So it doesn't mean you have to have a repeat, but it just kind of gives you a very broad, like ballpark sense of like where you're at. So doesn't mean we're not early, that's for sure, but we could still have some nice price discovery here before we begin the weekly cycle decline. So I like this here, and as we talked about, not to belabor the point, we're moving to the 8-year cycle high, right? Like that's like bigger picture. That's all we're doing. It is month 32, right? So we're well on our way. Last few topped out on month 35, so that gives you kind of a sense. I would expect our top later this year, and ETH is doing a very similar thing, very tactically. I think the 4-hour chart is a nice one to look at for these guys, for crypto in general. And so tactically, we've had this nice little bull flag on the 4-hour chart that held above, call it above 116,000, and now we're kind of off to the races. So I would look for a retest of this kind of zone. So between this and this as a next, potential clean entry for anyone that missed this move here, right? Like you can see that little bull flag that formed. That's the 4-hour. But again, we should expect several more weeks of upside given it's only week 12. That's Bitcoin, and ETH is doing a very similar thing, albeit slightly different levels. So for ETH, you gotta stay above 29.05 at this point, right? Like that's the low from this candle here on the daily, and you can see that's on the 4-hour chart, kind of a similar thing to Bitcoin, except you have a more clearly defined low here, down at that 29.05. That's what's marking that. So that's ETH. What about gold? So gold is an interesting one. So it looks like we're in a new weekly cycle, but it's just not made a whole lot of progress. So week 8, right? And on the daily chart, that puts us, we are on Friday was day 8. So that's important. We really need to go above 33.65 to kind of prove itself. But I'd say at this point, GDX has already told you that. We made that higher high off, so we're in a new weekly cycle. But for GDX, it's week 8. And for GDX, the low on Friday was $51.91. So that's your important kind of pivot point. But we're relatively early in the new weekly cycle. For silver, these things are kind of all over the place. Silver has been rallying for about 13 weeks itself. It's also, as I mentioned, higher than it's been in like almost 10 years. That's an important signal. Like, look, I know this chart is kind of ugly. Let's get rid of these. Like look at where we are versus like all this right? Like we're trying to chew through this kind of like we're like this kind of area, and then whoop, it's potential price discovery coming next. In terms of like your near term, the low on Friday was $36.93. Would love a little to test that, try to hold a higher low above that as your next kind of entry point. But, let's say like in the middle of the weekly cycle rally. Platinum is one that just continues to run. I mean, look at this thing. I mean, it looks like we're headed back to all-time highs, right? This pivot here was an important one to break through at 1339, and we're now well above that. I could see a world where we retest this from above, right? So that's important. We'll watch for that. But I mean, this thing is like, look at this horrendous consolidation. This is just month 2 of this breakout. So I would play this, right? This is interesting. So PPLT would be the way to play this. And the low this month is $121.26, right? Of this candle here. That could be, that's not a bad risk reward. You think about all-time high on this thing was what? 189. Yeah, that's not bad. So that's platinum, and finally we'll do natural gas, and then we'll look at uranium. So natural gas, trying to hold a little low here on the weekly. It's a doji. The range is $3.39 and a low of $3.08, and that's actually looking pretty positive. Looks like we have a daily cycle low here, but we've got to close above $3.35 to confirm that, right? Like that would be our first step, right? Something like that, right above this candle. So that's our signal there, and that would suggest that we're holding this weekly low here, and so we're ready to test the top end of this range. And finally, uranium, we'll look at a few names here, trying to make, like, we actually formed a little daily swing low. So URA, by closing above $37.17, nice little swing low off of this decline. So that's something that you could trade. At URNM, same thing. It's a little swing low, that one by closing above $45.25. And CCJ, same thing, swing low by closing above $71.87. For CCJ, I've talked about, this has a very clear pattern. An 11-week rally tends to be where we see some profit taking, and this was super steep. And we've now had 2 weeks of essentially consolidation, and this was a big doji. So I would watch for this to kind of resolve itself first, again, especially considering how vertical this is, and it happened to be right around the 11-12 week mark. So that would be my read on that. And that's all the updates for today. Thanks for watching.